Good evening, everyone. My name is Thane Rosenbaum, and I am the creative director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society at Touro College. And welcome to the FOLCS film series. Tonight's film, a new film, Blue Bayou, presented in partnership with our friends at Focus Features. The film opens nationally on September 17th, Friday night. It is just an absolute phenomenal film. Some of you have already gotten a chance to watch it through a pre-screening process. We have this evening with us the film's star, director, and writer, Justin Chon, who many of you might remember from the Twilight films, but this is an incredibly talented young man, and he's done other films, but this is a real sign, an indication of what we're going to be seeing from him. We also have tonight Mark O'Brien, who is also in the film, co-stars in the film. He's a Canadian actor, has done a lot of film and television, and we have immigration lawyer Michael Wilds is with us here. The film really gives us a new look, another way to enter the conversation on the immigration debate. And so we're looking forward to this film and very much encouraging you to watch it. If you're watching us live on Facebook, welcome. We always enjoy having you with us. Please go to folks.org and you'll give us your email address so you'll get updated information about upcoming events. You know why that would have been important today? This film sold out instantly within 24 hours. We were only given a limited number, as usual, screenings, and everyone wanted it. And so if you had gotten an earlier notice of it, you would have sought the film earlier. So there's an incentive. If you're watching Facebook, go on folks.org and give us your email address. And of course, if you have a question for either Justin or Mark or Michael, you can go to the Zoom Q&A box and leave it there. And let's see. All right, let's start. Justin, Mark, Michael, welcome all of you. Justin, can I just say, I'm going to speak to you personally now. I think you're a phenomenal filmmaker. You're going to be on our show again, no doubt. But as friend to friend, the next time you make a film that is this devastating in its emotional punch, that is going to leave me sobbing at night, warn me in advance. This film, you had me sobbing at 1 a.m. and I didn't like it. It was such a devastating, that ending, honestly, the audience, I'm not giving it away, but that ending should come with a Surgeon General's warning. It is.
Well, Tay, why did you watch it so late? Why'd you watch it so late? That's too late to watch a film.
Yeah, you know what, Justin, you should have said, and don't watch it alone. Be sure that people are around you for CPR purposes. Yes, I thought it was, emotionally devastating and really incredibly powerful. We'll talk about some things that you did, some choices that you made that really demonstrated, to my mind, honestly, that we were in the hands of a really polished filmmaker who was not interested in just, Hollywood cliches and Hollywood tropes. You took a lot of chances in this film that I thought were really not just courageous, but original. And a wake-up call for people that watch films to see what you can actually do with a film. And so really, congratulations. Let's get into just the very first question. The movie really gives us a crease of the immigration discussion that is often not discussed and not very well known, which is, unlike DACA dreamers who come here illegally with their parents often, what happens to children who come as infants or very young children who are adopted? Their parents are not here as Americans. They are adopted by Americans, but they never formalize their child's status by getting them a green card or a citizenship. And essentially, it exposes them to a deportation 30 years later, right? And that seems to me, this is part of the immigration debate, and we'll talk to Michael in a second, that I think is not very widely known. And so how did you come to it? Because I think you found a crease in the discussion that is very compelling, not just as a storytelling device, but just legally a very compelling issue within the immigration debate. How did you come to this idea?
So yeah, I think not many people might know, but the idea of international adoption originated from South Korea. This couple named the Holt couple, they came to Korea and they would find children that needed families or needed homes and place them in nice Christian families. across the United States. And then, as we all know, it's become a big business, and it's spread to different countries, you know, Russia, South America, Africa, China. And so, you know, after, you know, Korea, it's become sort of a big sort of business. And growing up, I knew quite a few Korean American adoptees. It's kind of a part of our sort of experience as Asian Americans that there's plenty. I think there's
Right.
like
Well,
120,000.
that's true, Justin. But did you know in growing up that they were not yet American citizens?
Of course not. And I don't think they knew. You know, that's why we're having this conversation, is they did not themselves know. So, you know, I started hearing from the community that this was taking place, that people who were adopted were being deported, and I thought it was absolutely insane. So I started doing more research. I talked to an immigration lawyer and started talking to other adoptees, and started reading some articles and stuff, and found out that once they are ordered to deport, it's an incredibly difficult process for them to overturn it or to return to the country. It's almost like impossible. So, you know, knowing that, I just thought that it was an incredibly important issue to shed a light on and expose to a wider audience.
Now, Michael, the law did change, I think, in the year 2000. Is that true that the law actually now does grant adoptees automatic citizenship, or is that not true? And if it is true, why wasn't it retroactively applied to children that would have been in the case of Antonio in the movie?
The government is trying. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm actually a second-generation immigration lawyer, and very proud to be part of this talk session. Adopting children in the United States has always been a contentious issue. Typically, you needed to have custodial process for 2 years when you're adopting a child in a foreign country, and domestic adoption has its own rules. They are trying to clean it up in the last 20 or so years, but we're party to The Hague and a lot of other local nuance throughout the world. And this film really coins the kind of problems that you have between not just international laws and international child abduction concerns, but also the federal and the state local level. So I could just say that it was brilliant to host this in the Bayou with Cajun accents, because an experience like this, you know, we go through boxes of tissue, Thane, every week before the pandemic. Literally every week, my secretary has to remove the box holder and put a new tissue box in. And they are trying to improve on this, but it is a work in progress still.
So, but Michael, just one last question. The idea of the applying it retroactively, is that something that is being considered?
It's being considered, but it has never been done.
Okay.
We literally have children that have never been told that they were adopted, that were in abusive relationships, as was coined in this film, it's too late for them to fix it. And there's no mechanism in a post-Trump immigration era to go into the system and then fix it.
So, Mark, you are a Canadian who lives in the United States now. We are very familiar with what is being called a crisis at the southern border. We never say there's a crisis at the northern border. We seem to always welcome in Mark O'Brien or Martin Short or Michael J. Fox. We love, you know, actors from Canada come and live here. They're always welcome. But I wonder whether this, for you, in the decision to be a co-star in the film, whether this was something that, as an immigrant to the United States, it had a different kind of resonance for you, and also a sense of a different kind of an appreciation. This is not Canada's experience when, you know, Canadians come to the United States, correct?
You're right. It's absolutely alarming, to tell you the truth, because, and it shows how relative everything is. And I think, you know, I immigrated, I have a green card. And while I was getting it, the loopholes you had to go through, and I'm sure Michael knows all about this, some of them seem ridiculous and kind of like, why would they need to know such information? And that doesn't matter. And then there are little things that they kind of, when you go to have your meeting, they kind of trick you and ask you stuff that you said you wouldn't be asked and all this kind of stuff. However, when you see this, when you hear this story, you're like, oh my God, we have it so much easier. It's kind of just, it's very welcomed. Yeah. And I know people who didn't have as strong as a package as I did to be able to come here. and who were welcomed in easily, who didn't even hire a lawyer. They didn't even need a lawyer. You
Right.
just go online and go through the steps. So when I see something like this, when I heard this story, I was like, oh my God, it really puts everything in perspective, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I'm curious, Michael, you said there isn't a mechanism to put that in. What would it take to put that in? Like, why is is it a decision made on a higher level that they don't want to put in a mechanism?
So just for background's sake, my dad was John Lennon's lawyer in the 70s when they were trying to deport the famous Beatle. And I walked into the practice, and the first case I had was an adoption case. And we were thankfully in removal proceedings, which means I had remedies where I could fix it. Here in the film, Justin couldn't make the appearance, but we had the
we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to. I don't want to get to that part yet, but go ahead.
No, but to answer your question, Mark, right now there are no mechanisms to get before a judge who can fix something. And the Biden administration, it was a breath of fresh air when he came in, because he was going to create those mechanisms. It's now almost a year into his term, and we don't see a lot of those. They're beginning to talk about it, but the idea is, if you have something that's broken, you'll be able to go into the courts and fix it. Right now, there is no mechanism, and a lot of people are stuck out unless they can do O1 visas and the other visas that, like yourself,
well, I think that the confusing part about that, Mark, is that the real issue is that, unlike an American citizen, there are simply rights under the Constitution that simply don't apply to the undocumented, or even those who have been formally adopted in the United States. So that what Michael, I think, is saying is that, the appellate process that would normally kick in, right, where you get to appeal what just happened or seek an injunction to stop things as they are until we get more of a further consideration, simply just doesn't work. And in fact, these courtrooms, I thought this was captured nicely with Justin in the film. They're not, they'd often, Michael probably appears in these all the time. Sometimes they don't really look like courtrooms at all. They're administrative hearing, right? They're administrative hearing rooms that don't have the posh of a courtroom, because they're not really they're not part of federal court system. They're not part of the state court system. They're part of the administrative court system. So everything doesn't apply in the same way. And that's what's different. So Justin, I want to get back to this question, and we'll come back, Michael, to something that you raised before. I think the movie opens on just a terrifically original idea, which is that you can have a Cajun accent and you can have a Cajun last name and you could know everything about the Bayou in Louisiana and yet not be a Cajun. In other words, that the people who live in Louisiana, it's not surprising to discover that someone with Antonio who speaks in the, this was you picked up an amazing Cajun accent, and I'm familiar with the accent. So you captured it well, not just as a director, but as an actor. But that Antonio discovers, it's as if he didn't know before, but I'm sure he did, that the accent and the name isn't going to do it. That he is still a true stranger, an other, an alien, right? Spoken to as if he's an alien. It's a politically incorrect word to use today, but the movie introduces that idea. And so I just thought maybe we should talk about how you opened with that idea, as if to send a message very, very clearly. This is an Asian, but in every other way, he's an American. And not only is American, he's from Louisiana in every way that one can be.
Yeah, I think it was part of the reason of setting the film in Louisiana was for that particular reason, because, had this film been set in Los Angeles or New York, it's not special to see, there's nothing about it that really makes you question, what makes an American. And with that accent, I don't, with that accent and having a white stepchild, like, clinging to your arm, it's hard to kind of deny this person of this place. But, the reason for opening on that shot and in that interview is particularly for that reason, is you can't turn her away. I don't cut on purpose, so you have to deal with it. And then it becomes normalized very quickly. I think once you hear that conversation and you see this guy start to spring into action, the accent kind of becomes an afterthought very quickly. And his circumstances become very normalized very quickly. And that's what I wanted is this not to be a novelty type of thing. You know, if we slowly start to reveal it, I think you've already wasted like 20 minutes of the film getting people on board with the idea of these things.
Well, the other thing that you did in the film that I thought was excellent to reinforce that idea was that Antonio's, other than his wife, who is from Louisiana and Cajun, all of his friends are Cajuns of color, right? They're all minorities that live in Louisiana, which make one think that there is this, you know, that there is separation, right? That the natural separation that we think about with the Deep South, Louisiana is not oftentimes thought of in that way, but that continued, right? That there was a limit to how American a Korean adoptee who showed up that young could be. No matter what he did, there was a limit. His buddies were going to be more like him, and you know, he seems friendless in terms of the long-standing people from New Orleans, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, if you, it's just natural. I mean, geographically too of the city. I mean, if you just go up Magazine Street towards, you know, the better neighborhoods and the university, you know, you'll see that it gets less and less diverse. I mean, that's just naturally how it is.
Yeah, right.
You know, and then if you go on the West Bank or the East Side, you know, it's going to be very much what you see in the film, which is where the film takes place.
So, Michael, let's go back to a point that Mark raised, but I want to frame it to you a little differently, which is, and I'm not giving any reveals away of the big reveals, but I can say that the reason why Justin doesn't make it to the courthouse, it's one thing when Mark says, why isn't there a process that, you know, could somehow formalize adoptions, make them more retroactively, and have them become green cards in the same way that Mark O'Brien got his, right? It's another thing to say that your one shot before this administrative law judge was taken away from you by a rogue cop who takes his buddies out and they beat the crap out of you, right? And that's why you missed your hearing, right? So one wonders, oh, come on. Once that became known, even once Mark O'Brien's character, Ace, knows, once another cop knows this happened, was there really nothing at that point that could be done? In other words, the point that I want to have the audience understand is the deck so stacked against an undocumented that even under this set of facts, right? Like, it's not like he was in a car accident. This is the worst reason, like everybody sympathetically should say, give this man his day in court. And yet that never is mentioned in the movie about a second chance.
Well, excellent snapshot of what was missing. But the truth is that there is a motion that you can make based on extraordinary circumstances to get that hearing. And it could be made that the gentleman was beaten up by a cop and therefore missed his hearing by no action of his own. It's interesting. You know, I teach in a law school now for over 11 years. My dad taught before me for 33 years. So we've seen the evolution of some of the laws and the language. It's now no longer aliens or undocumented. They're now known as non-citizens. Immigration has come out formally referring to individuals who are without documents as non-citizens, which is a very gracious term when you're coming about aliens from outer space. I think the genuineness of the children in this movie and the ethnicity, which was so robust, in the middle of nowhere, comparative to where immigrants generally migrate, underscores the significant contributions that immigrants make in the familial circles, and how that is not alien, if you would, to what the United States founding documents and mission is. So I thought it was very important, Justin, that you relied so heavily on children. Child didn't see that you look different than somebody else. The sound looked like everybody else there. But
yeah, except that that's another point, and maybe Mark and Justin certainly can step in. There is a sub theme of, even though precisely because of Justin standing out of all places in Louisiana, not a place where you think many Asians might be, and he's an adopted person, that this is a tattoo artist His daughter, his stepdaughter, has such a relationship to him that she wants to color her hair, right? That there is this theme of reinvention or transformation. You have the cancer patient and the hair. There seems to be in the writing of this, Justin, and certainly in the performance of it, Mark, a theme of, isn't there some other way we can fit in? Isn't there any way that we can bring in more of a sense of connection, you know, to each other and to this country in order to generate more sympathy? You know, this is a character who really had absolutely no connection to Asian culture. We learned that in the movie. You know, he was an American in every way possible. And frankly, even as a tattoo artist, right? There's no sense that as a tattoo artist, he's Asian, right? That he doesn't have a preference for, he would draw anything. So I wonder whether that there is something there that both of you were trying to achieve in this ongoing, you know, Mark plays the ex-husband who's also a cop. He's trying to, you know, reconnect with his daughter, who is now the stepdaughter of your character. But Michael is right when he says that Jessie doesn't see the difference. She doesn't see the difference. What is it that draws her to want to change her hair to have Antonio's hair color?
Well, just you know, just exposure. I mean, and love. I mean, you know, that whole idea came from this thing I heard from a friend of mine who grew up in Hawaii. That's white with blonde hair. She said that she went to school. Hawaii is predominantly Asian American, and where she went to school, and because all her friends had black hair, she wanted black hair, so she would dye her hair black. But she was a blonde girl, you know, and I could only imagine if you had, you know, a father you care about that has black hair, and you might too have that thought, you know, because she's not seeing it as something that's lesser than, you know, lesser than what she is. She's an innocent child that just wants to connect with her father. You know, and in terms of transformation and all that stuff, all I'm trying to do is normalize things and expose things that I think are you know, present in our country. You know, I think the whole Asian American aspect of it, you know, there's a huge enclave of Vietnamese Americans in New Orleans and across the South, because that's where they got relocated from after the Vietnam War. You know, in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, you know, Alabama, they're all over. So, you know, these are the things that I felt that I wanted to showcase, especially, you know, in American cinema, you would rarely see two Asian ethnicities in one film. It's usually you're only allowed room for one.
Well, it's not just that.
You know,
yeah, go ahead, finish up, Justin. Sorry.
Yeah, no, just you know, I'm just trying to show my reality is what
I think so. I just wanted to add about transformation too. I think with children, Justin and I each have a daughter around the same age. When a kid is so young, they haven't had time to transform yet. They're still forming. So there's nothing to transform from, which is beautiful. And that's why kids are so pure and like, they don't want them to grow up. But I think also too, it's like, it's hard to transform when you're in a small group. Like, for example, like for Ace, you know, he's a cop and that's the world he knows. And New Orleans is small. You know what I mean? It's not a huge place. And I come from a very small place where it's like, if you want to stand out and say something different, it's hard to do. Transformation takes a lot of introspective work. And I think, but it's also the nature of story. This is, you know, he's telling a story, and it's nice that I think most of the characters are transformed to some degree. I mean, because that's what makes them interesting.
Yeah, but what's different here, when Justin said before that the two different groups of Asians, normally you can only have one, it's more than that in this film, because in Hollywood films, when you see ethnic groups, I actually wrote about this once for the LA Times many years ago, there's a standard way of doing it, which is, you know, you see it in My Big Fat Greek Wedding or Fiddler on the Roof or Bend It Like Beckham. They're all the same, which is that you will show us your culture, but by the end, you need to be like us. You know, at the end of this movie, you kind of have to be us. You can be Greek, but you want to be us. At the end of Bend It Like Beckham, we have to accept that your children are going to be British. But here, what's interesting is you have one set of Asian family that is preserving their Asian culture in Louisiana. and you have one Asian character who doesn't have the slightest idea of what it means to have Asian culture, which makes this a completely unique film. Like nothing like that has ever, I don't know whether that's something that's part of when you said, yes, they're two different groups. It's more than that.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's the spectrum. Yeah, I think that's the spectrum of our experiences. I think it's not just one thing, as you're saying, and it is partially the reason I'm motivated to push the boundaries when it comes to those portrayals.
Yeah.
Like in the sense that Antonio has a Cajun accent, as you speak of.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Justin,
Michael,
it's interesting because there was a betrayal to the Asian community historically. We had the Chinese Exclusion Acts, where literally the Chinese community built all the railroad tracks from California all the way out to New York. And when they were done and they became competitive, it took about 100 years. Finally, it was President Johnson, by the Statue of Liberty, that got rid of these dastardly laws. So the notion that the Asian community is pioneering and expanding itself beyond the typical cities throughout our nation is actually a heartwarming experience and part of the culture of finding other immigration lawyers and talent to help this community when they have challenges. That's a big problem that we have with detention centers throughout the United States. Generally, there's a good argument to keep them in counties and in areas where there are good immigration lawyers, as opposed in Oakdale, Louisiana, Yorkville, Pennsylvania, where you'll get a handful of talent. So the culture of betrayal underscores in many ways to people like us who toil in this area, many of the themes that you had in the film.
Mark, you have an interesting, I think, acting challenge here, and it also demonstrated what I would say is Justin's directorial and writerly vision about this, because he really rejects some of the tropes, the contrivances of a Hollywood movie, rejects them in the sense that normally the Asian woman in this character, the woman named Parker, who has cancer, would enter in a normal Hollywood movie. It seems to me she'd be a love interest, right? She would be the person who he would be somehow drawn to because he is so, alienated truly from his actual family on so many levels, and the level of frustration that he experiences in Louisiana is so unbearable that he would be drawn to her and where she comes from. But that's not what this is about. And similarly, your character would be the ex-husband, right? He would be the thug, right? He would be the guy that would take every advantage possible to get rid of Antonio, right? To work his way back into the life of his ex-wife and to recapture a relationship with his daughter. That is in every movie. That character, Justin, every movie, every television show has that. Justin said, no, I don't want any of that. If we're gonna have the ex-husband here and he's a cop, even though he's a Southern cop, we're gonna do something else. That's something obviously you and Justin discussed.
That's what the first time Justin and I met, that's what I love, because it's like what you said, you can't put anything in a box. You can't say the white cop ex-husband is necessarily a terrible person. We can't do that, because if we do that at all, then we're damned. You know what I mean? And I think showing that there is a side to that, or there's a conflict to that, is interesting. But that's what Justin does. I mean, you mentioned some of those movies like Bennett, like Beckham, and all those movies. I mean, those are studio movies.
Right.
And there's a certain way they want to do it. They're all studio movies. Or if not, they're influenced by studio movies, or they're picked up by the studio. And Justin did something which are guided by studio ideas. Justin is guided by his heart. And that shows the difference. It's like when we talk about Hollywood or we talk about films all telling us that, it's like, well, maybe the studio is telling you that necessarily, but not movies aren't telling you that. Right. Those movies are telling you that. And that's why when you have directors like Justin around, we're in safe hands where you can show the complex nature of it all. And like you talk about being transformative, where people have more than one level to them. And Justin, I think that's important. Yeah.
Justin, thanks. That's a great answer, Mark. Justin, can you respond a little to that too? Because I just praised you as being someone who rejects a certain trope, and you gave us misdirection, I would say, meaning that you led us into believe that Mark is the angry ex-husband who's going to manipulate the situation. Especially when you wrote the line that Mark says, to Antonio, I know you stole the motorcycles, right? At that point, of course, he's going to exploit that information that not only is the stepfather of my child, someone I want to get rid of, he just committed a crime and I'm a cop and I'm going to make sure that this guy is, because this is the way I'm going to get my family back. So I wonder, in your, now as a writer, you not just as an actor and director, as a writer, you had given this a lot of thought. You know, what Mark said is the Hollywood template, right? You knew that a studio chief in a suit would say, what are you, out of your mind? You know, we don't do that. We don't do that with Parker, and we don't do that with Ace. That's not what we do. So you must have, was this, first of all, obviously intentional, but also, did you have second thoughts? Did you have doubt that this is something that an audience can accept, given how we've been fed this same cliche a zillion times?
I didn't have doubt because of the thought of playing into three-dimensional characters and humanity, right? I felt that, you know, Mark's character Ace, we did, you know, I did lead them down that road, but at the end of the day, I wanted to show that we're all human and we all feel we're justified in what we do. You know, there are no true, you know, of course there's evil in the world, but there's no true villains, because even villains have, you know, justifications for, they have absolute clear reasons for what they do. But, you know, I just don't think life is that simple and that cut and dry where you're just either bad or good. I think there's so much gray area within all of us. And I'm trying to expose that. I'm trying to show that we all have a little bit of good and bad and prejudice, but then also kindness, you know? And I think, you know, there's a scene in the film that I truly, it tormented me to cut and just pained me to cut, because it's seriously like some of the best acting I've seen. But there's a scene with Ace and Kathy, you know, Mark and Alicia, that you know, Alicia comes back to Mark's place, and it's one of the most beautiful, I mean, it's definitely the most beautiful scene that I've filmed, but she comes and she goes, you know what, I'll give you the kid, you know, I'll give you the kid. And he's just a full human being, and it's not even about that anymore. They're just as two humans that have had a history, have a moment, and it just takes a step back for a second, where you see these two people just struggling to, you know, fight for both of their objectives, but then in this moment need to see eye to eye for the sake of their child, right? And it pained me to cut that scene. It ultimately came down to, like, you know, kind of keeping the film a bit more focused and the pacing right, but it was always been the plan to humanize Ace, because what is he doing wrong? He's really just wants to be a part of his daughter's life.
What's
like, you know,
and also too, the smart writing in there, Justin, I thought too, was also, if he cares so much about his daughter, he knows that his daughter loves Antonio a lot as well.
Yes.
So if he rats on Antonio, not rats on, if he reports on Antonio, that's going to destroy his daughter. And that's actually following the character's motivation. It's interesting, Justin, with that scene, because I remember when I saw it too, I was like, oh, that scene's in there. You always kind of realize after, like a while later, it was like a few days later or something. I was like, I don't think that scene was in there. But I think what it cuts to, what's great about that is that I think if that scene is in there, there's more of an idea that that family might be okay without Antonio. And that doesn't tell the full truth of what's happening right now. That when these people are separated, when these families are separated in life, it's not ideal. There's no part of it that can be okay.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a family. I thought it was better without it too.
Yeah. The one thing that you didn't film, if I may, the one thing that you didn't film was the abuse, Justin, that you had from your citizen parents.
Yeah.
You know, and
that's also a trope, though. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's also, he didn't do that for that reason. He didn't have to show it. He knew it. The audience knows it.
It's felt. It's felt. You know. Yeah. And Michael, I absolutely agree. You know, I didn't show it, but it was a purposeful thing. Is I don't want to see that. You know, I just don't want to see that. I want it to be felt.
And we can. Right. And the audience, I think, feels it. I think the audience knows. Michael, I want to ask you a question about this. We're going back to something that Mark had said. First of all, how is it that in this situation with Antonio deported, how does he ever see his child again? Are there visa privileges? The film Like what would be available? The audience doesn't know, but there will be a child born in the United States. That's his child. What rights does he have as a deported person?
So I want you to know, I watched the film with my wife, who's also an immigration lawyer, who I met in my father's class. So we were sitting there writing all the different things in our brain that we would have done or suggested. There are ways to bring people back that have been deported. And our office has a rogue's lesson in history. There's a gentleman in Englewood, New Jersey, where I'm the mayor, who actually was deported. He owns an ice cream place, and we brought him back, married to a Jew, Pakistani, and we were able to get him back after he was deported. Sometimes we can plan it where somebody goes and comes back, and we've gotten federal judges to reach out and bring people in. Interestingly, the Violence Against Women Act would allow anybody in Justin's position until the age of 21 to self-petition for a green card if their foster parents were U.S. citizens and were abusive. So there are ways legitimately that Congress has put in to prevent what happened here. And if, God forbid, somebody leaves, and there are petitions, waivers, and applications you can make for permission to reapply after being removed. Now, again, you consulted with a lawyer, and the drama was extraordinarily well done and acted. The next stage, the film Blue Bayou 2, would have as much drama in trying to bring.
How long does it take? How long did it take for that man to come back?
We turned the gentleman around. This is pre-pandemic, about 15 years ago. We got him back in 6 months. But I called every senator, every congressman.
So what I'd like to say, Michael, is the legal system in the United States, it's a costly system, you know, and I wish you were everybody's lawyer that is in the process of deportation or has been deported. The truth of the matter is not everyone can find a pro bono lawyer, and not everyone can find an effective lawyer such as yourself. So, you know, it really does require, it does matter. It does matter who's representing you.
Yeah, and I want you to understand another theme here was the minor transgressions. You're in a supermarket, a cop sees a voice that's raised, a racist cop then engages. These are systems that the federal government is trying to avoid. It used to be that you were able to have local police turn people over unless there's significant crimes. But the film, I think, really underscored you need proper counsel.
But I also,
if you have a criminal issue, you see a criminal lawyer. But if you're here as a non-citizen, you need an immigration lawyer. You have an adoption issue, either the child or the parents. You don't just see a family lawyer. You have to consult. And that's the problem, like you said, it's a costly thing in all the different systems.
Justin, I want to just pick up on something Michael said and Mark was interested in, which is that yeah, you could have had Blue Bayou 2, but given what Mark said about your filmmaking style, that's not something you would be looking to achieve. In other words, you ignored, even if Michael was your advisor in the film and told you about this, I hope you would have rejected him. I hope you would have said, yeah, I'm not going to have a Kramer versus Kramer moment. I don't need a Kramer versus Kramer moment. The studio, according to Mark's going to say, yeah, if you're going to switch the kid at the end, you need another scene to show how the kid is still really connected to both parents so that people can walk away and feel good that there's co-parenting and the child was not ripped away from the father. She's gonna see. So I would hope that you would have said to Michael, forget that. I'm not doing that. I want the audience to face the reality of deportation as death. I don't know if he's coming back. I don't know if that's even possible, what you just said to Michael. I don't know if I could get him a lawyer at the quality of Michael Wilde's for that. I have to assume that he isn't coming back, and I'm not going to provide a cheap feel-good moment that I could in fact bring him back. No, I want the audience to sit with deportation as death. I just want to have one other thing that I want to ask Mark, which is what goes back to what his motivation for the character of not being the evil ex-boyfriend or ex-husband is, that I think, and I guess Michael should add into this, that Ace has good legal grounds in court to either overturn the custody arrangement, right? In other words, under these facts, especially because Antonio is undocumented. Even if he didn't steal motorcycles, right? I'm assuming that that's, that he knew what he gives up when Justin says this scene that he cut out, right? That in there is also the idea that there's something about Ace that recognizes what's best for his daughter.
I think so too. I also think it goes back to that thing of change too. Like, I also think as a character outside of the themes we're talking about, like I think it takes a while for him to stand up for anything, be it good or bad. It takes by the end of the film for him to stand up for whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like I said, when you're in a small town and stuff like that, like it's hard to change. And I think, but I do think when you, like, I have a daughter, I love her, I just want her to be happy. And that's really what it comes down to. Something I'm fascinated by is this, is no one ever talks about it when someone is deported and it's like, oh, maybe they'll come back, we might be able to get them back. Like, if that takes years, those years, that's irreparable damage, I think, for the formative years of a child and a family. Like, so that's something that's like never talked about sometimes. And Michael, not to diminish your point, I mean, you got that man back after 6 months. It's, and I'm sure you worked so hard for that. Well, sometimes you hear it said like, oh, they were able to come back, and I'm like, but how long? Like, how long?
In the life of a child, what that would mean.
Exactly, it's never discussed. It seems like.
Right.
I was also very grateful to you, Justin, that you worked into the film Ace actually handcuffing his partner for the abuse.
Yeah.
With the whole Black Lives Matter conversations and corrupt supremacists kind of getting into the police departments. You kind of.
Oh, my brother-in-law's a cop. Yeah.
So
my brother-in-law's a cop. Yeah.
There's a nobility mark to the role that you played, and the way you played it was excellent. And just even the way you looked at Justin's character and everything, at the last scenes in the airport, with such compassion that you realized that both you and Justin had a job in raising the child, and that you were coming around. And the fact that you swallowed the notion that he stole the motorcycles kind of showed a big picture, kind of, well, this is the guy who my daughter is looking up to. So you have an imagination, at least I did, what happens when he lands in Korea and who's talking to who. And I see, so I see the two of you in conversation over the best interests of a child, where a government can't get it right, fathers do.
Yeah, no,
the best films play out the last act, I think, when you're walking out of the theater, and that's what this is.
Yeah, and I think that's right, both of you, because in fact, it takes it almost out of the hands of the legal system and lets the two fathers work it out. Truly, instead of letting a judge decide what's the best interest of the child, let the fathers. It's just that our system is so antagonistic that the fathers would never in any way jointly come together for that purpose.
Yeah.
There's another trope here that you didn't fall into, Justin, which is that because we learned so early on that Antonio knows nothing about Asian culture, and only after he visits Parker's house does he start a sense of Asian food, Asian music, Asian artifacts, Asian everything. You can almost imagine the movie that says that there's a happy ending in having him return to his home, right? That if he could in fact imagine a life that he returns to his daughter, that in fact he also benefits, that he's returns, because the movie is filled with that. All of his time spent staring at the bayou felt to me as if it was a return to the crime scene, the drowning, the placidity of the water of the bayou somehow drew repressed memories of his childhood. And I thought that was yet another idea that you didn't fall into, because you took it as, no, deportation is just bad. There is nothing good that can be said about it, right?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, I was born in this country. I was fortunate enough to be born in this country. But my parents, country is Korea, and it's no different than someone who's brought here at 2 or 3, so I don't see any positive that would come out of me being, taken out of this country, away from my family to so-called the motherland, So, I don't know, I definitely didn't want to go down that road where it's a positive in any way, and ultimately, if this film gets enough attention, we need people like Michael, and we need, other, people who are involved in the legal system to take it from there and get enough attention on this issue to maybe make some reform. That's the true purpose of a film like this, is for us to start talking about it so that things can be done. And Michael has mechanisms to make it easier for people in this particular situation to stay.
Or if you need new material, I can give you 100 more cases like this.
Yeah, I think he's done this. He's got this down. So, but it does raise a question. If you were watching, this FOLCS has a global audience. And so therefore, all sorts of people are watching tonight. And they have I suspect some people had different political views on the immigration debate. And I wonder whether someone is saying, this is a really manipulative film because it is so heart-wrenching and it is just so sympathetic on every level to Antonio and Jessie, even the cop, everybody, but that this doesn't really speak to what we're talking about, right? When people are part of the anti-immigration debate, they're talking about, what about Afghans that believe in Sharia law? What about Mexicans that really come from cartels, right? That this movie is a diversion for the stuff that really matters in the immigration debate. How would any of you reply to something like that?
This is real life. It's
yeah.
It's not an opinion. It's real life.
It's a child. It's typical of the media on the right, the Fox News and so forth, to conflate things. This is to be distinguished from the different kinds of immigrants, the 1 million DACA dreamers, which came out of the Lenin case, mind you, and all the other issues that we have with immigration from different communities. The fact is, he blended so artfully the Asian theme here to show that this is a culture historically that has to sustain this kind of enslavement, if you would, in the immigration matrix of the United States.
Yeah. Justin, do you have any thoughts? Because it's a statement film. You wrote it, you directed it, you started it. It is literally yours. It is a Valentine that you gave to the world. And Valentine has a particular point of view. How would you respond to people who have strong issues about immigration?
Yes. We're not talking about the instances that you're talking about in this film. And like we talked about earlier, I didn't try to make anyone, not falling into those tropes and not trying to make it anyone's fault, right? Mm-hmm. This particular story is, I think, pretty fair and honest. And listen, that's why I made Antonio flawed. That's why I made him have a criminal record, because it's not so cut and dry. I wanted him to be flawed, and because if I made him a perfect person, then that's truly okay. Yeah, you got this is obviously has strong agendas, but I made him flawed. So there is a gray area there. Yet he was brought here by U.S. citizens. The government acknowledged that, adoption, and he was illegally brought from a different country as a child and had no say in that decision. I'm just posing the questions. I don't think, yes, it's emotionally heavy-handed, and admittedly so, because I want you to feel something, and I want you to feel empathy for somebody who's going through this. I'm not telling you what's right and wrong. I have my personal beliefs and I have personal reasons why I made this, but at the end of the day, I'm not telling you what to think. So, the audience can leave the theater and choose what to think. And that's the purpose of this film, is to create conversation. And I think that's more productive.
Also, I think it's smart too, what Justin did, is that at the end, anyone, because that's an interesting point. Anyone would bring up, this is like, there's an agenda here. But at the end, we see real cases. After the narrative is ended, we see real cases are mentioned that this has happened. So right. It's like, like if anyone just wants to deny that, then, go watch another movie.
Mark, that was the point that you made earlier when you said this is life. That's your point, right? That these stories actually do happen. And so they're not fictional. This is actual life. And yes, there's a lot of different stories about immigration, and this is clearly one of them. Before we take some questions from the audience, I just want to say, the title of the film, it was interesting how you ended up working in the Eagles' Linda Ronstadt song by having Alicia sing it. I found it so haunting, that decision that you made to have her sing. I don't know if you knew she was a singer, but haunting in a number of ways. First of all, you know, the key line in the song is "I'm going back someday."
Yeah.
And I couldn't get past that line. I go, wow, in this kind of a movie, and Antonio's face, you really nailed it there. Like it was very hard to read him. You know, he's watching his wife sing this song, this incredible ballad, right? And he's someone who spends a lot of time staring at the bayou. He loves looking at the water. And we don't know idea exactly, other than he's maybe recalling his childhood in Korea. But that's why I said before, I wonder whether you thought that maybe having him return might have some value in some ways as a storytelling device, because when here he is for the first time being exposed to Asian culture, right? And then his wife sings the song that says, "I'm going back someday." And I wonder, and then even when she says the fishing boats, I just thought this is just such an interesting use of a song that everyone knows, and that you didn't, you know, I don't know, I just love that decision that you made. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, you know, the idea of it came early on in the writing process. You know, everything else was set. You know, he was supposed to go to the bayou, and you know, I rediscovered the Ronstadt's version of that song, and I was just listening to lyrics as you're talking about, and it just felt so what this family was going through, and it had this melancholic, when you link it to this film, it has a very melancholic, you know, vibe, and I felt like, but the song inherently is not sad. It's not like sung in a sad manner, but the things that are said are quite emotional. And I thought that, you know, in the midpoint, when everybody thinks that everything is going to be okay, you know, like falsely think that everything is going to be okay, they're at this moment where everybody's sort of like in a good mood, but it's all a facade. They all know what's to come. They all know, you know, all the terrible things that could happen and what they're up against. But there's just this one moment where they're just taking a break and just enjoying themselves. And I felt like this song, it was like a haunting reminder of what they're about to deal with. And when she sings it to him, you know, it's almost like they're subliminally connecting in that moment, being like, man, it could have been nice. It could have, like, I don't know what's going to happen from here on out, but it's probably going to be pretty fucked up.
Great. Yeah, I love that. I think that's, yes, it was as if she was singing to him, right? I mean, it's just so fascinating. You know, they asked her to sing a song, right? And so this is the song that she chooses to sing. And they're so emotionally overloaded by the night already, right? It's an overload. And so I thought, wow, this is, you know, their level of emotional vulnerability, both of them, at that point is extraordinary. And then she sings this song about "I'm going back someday," and that the song is called Blue Bayou, and he knows he's facing deportation, which will take him away from this bayou into perhaps some other bayou in Korea. I think it is just very powerful. Let me take a question from the audience and we'll say goodnight to our friends. This is from Leslie Darnhansoff. It's a nice name. Leslie, I love this question. It's something that was in my notes, so I'm having you ask it instead. Justin's question of Parker's father, whether he felt regret about his decision to separate the family emigrating to the United States, was the only moment in the film which left me uncertain unto what he was actually trying to discover. And it's an interesting point that Leslie's making. For instance, I think what she's saying, Leslie, forgive me if I'm misinterpreted. What Leslie is saying is he asks the father this question because he's a father, right? And he's contemplating the possibility that he's going to be put in the exact same position of separating the family. So I think Leslie is saying, since it's the only time that this comes up in such a direct way, what does Antonio want to hear? In other words, does Antonio want to, the father ends up saying something like, "I have no regrets at all. Not for a second do I regret it." right? But I'm wondering, given that the audience at that point doesn't know what Antonio is going to do, right? What is it that you thought, what is the answer to that question? What does Antonio want to hear?
I think that it's challenging Antonio and what the things that he wants in his life. It's challenging him to make a decision. You know, I think ultimately, you know, that was intentional in the sense that that's her dad, that's Parker's dad's experience. It doesn't have to be Antonio's experience, but you know, until the last moment, I think that's what creates, like, is he going to go or stay? You don't know. You don't, you know, it creates that uncertainty. But of course, Antonio's thinking about it. Of course, like especially at the dinner in the middle of the film, the party, you know, he listens to the story and obviously takes it in. And Parker is sort of like a mentor figure to him because, you know, she's at the end of her life, so she can tell him what are the things that matter, like in life, and what he should possibly fight for. And
there's extraordinary the way the transition between the woman who actually is playing a mentoring role, dying just as his daughter is born, right? An overwhelming amount of emotion, loss, right, with rebirth. I have a question, Mark. I don't know if you had something you wanted. I would have been curious if you had something to add to answer that question too, because although it's not your character, I think it is an interesting question about, you know, and after all, you too are a green card holder, you know, and maybe you have children. Like the family separation is such a huge part of this movie, right? It's not just about, it's about deportation, it's about separation and about abandonment. You know, there's all of those themes are very, very powerful, and they overlap: deportation, abandonment, and separation. I think that question that Leslie just asked is a very important one because he's searching. And I'm going to leave you with that question, and I'm going to leave all of you with one more, and then we'll say goodnight, which was, so Mark, you'll answer that, but I want to leave one more question that might fit into this, which is that his friend, who's an ICE officer, right, which was a very powerful idea, at some point has custody of him in the end. You know, this is a guy that in all of his efforts on his motorcycle, when he's going fast, speed is a big part of this movie. No one seems to catch him. It's very clear that when he's blowing through on a motorcycle, no one catches him. Why doesn't he run away? And Michael, could you answer the question, when the ICE officer says to him, no one will catch you if you flee, is that true? So anyways, Mark, why don't you, is that even true? Because it does raise the question, how honorable is he that he shows up voluntarily? I'm not even sure that he would have been paroled out of the first detention. Why does he even get out of detention the first time? Why would they assume that he would return on his own recognizance? He shows up like an honorable guy on the day he's supposed to show up. And when he's been told by an ICE officer that he could flee and never be caught, he doesn't take the bait. So anyway, Mark, before we get to that last question, do you have anything you want to add to the idea of what it is that Antonio really wants to hear from the old man?
Well, I can't. I honestly, I think that's interesting, but I don't know if I can answer that. But in regards to the separation thing, like,
yes,
I can relate to this to some degree. I immigrated to the States from Canada, though, so it's so different. And I chose to leave all my family. I have 3 sisters. All my friends, everyone. I chose to leave where I didn't know anyone, not one person. The difference is, I chose. Yeah, I mean that's the difference. And I mean, we see that going on right now in Texas. It's like choice, and I think that's the whole thing. If you can choose, you can't regret because you chose.
Justin, do you want to, before Michael answers it legally, do you want to answer what I said? I threw out the speed kills, and in this movie, speed in this film comes up a lot, and it doesn't appear that anyone would ever catch this guy, especially if he was on a motorcycle. Why didn't you take that bait and go all Bonnie and Clyde on us? You didn't even do that. Can't you find one Hollywood trope, for the love of God, man? Can't you just do one thing that everyone else does?
Well, to be clear, what the ICE officer says is not, you won't get caught. He says, I won't catch you. And he says, I won't catch you. So it's not a matter of like the agency won't catch him. He won't
I
not
thought he
personally
said
be
ice.
looking
It's
for him.
funny. I thought he said ice won't catch you.
No, he says, I will
Oh,
not
that's
catch
interesting.
you. I will,
I thought he
I
said
won't catch you.
Yeah, like my people will never actually track you down, which I
No,
thought
no.
that
Yeah.
can't be true, right, Michael?
No,
Those
no.
guys.
ICE will come and find him. Yeah, ICE will come and find him somehow. But he says, I will not personally
I
catch
see.
you. I will. You know, that there's the humanity in that. As a friend, he maybe doesn't agree with the situation. You know, just insinuating at things. But his friend is saying, you know, I won't be the one to catch you. You know,
Yeah,
it's what he's saying.
Michael, last word on that.
Yeah, so
very quickly, so we say goodnight.
I think what Mark said succinctly, this is life. This was such an accurate portrayal of the process. I tip my hat to you, Justin. The ICE officer was speaking for himself. There are a lot of people that abscond. Of course, you don't have wheels in your heels and the speed that you spoke to when you have a wife and you have a child and you have a baby on the way. So, you know, yes, he can take off, but he's going to have to return and face the music. We also see the kind of gentleman.
But he could have taken off with them. They could have gone to Montana.
You're not so portable with now ICE and a police officer.
Yeah.
Going to be looking for you. So
good point.
Yes,
good point.
I have to tell you, in our world, people abscond all the time. As officers of the court, we can't encourage it. But if they're less portable, if there's less portability in family members, they definitely take off.
Okay.
That said, I know lots of families that have resettled in other parts of the country. They have final orders of removal, and they're living under this threat. And that pressure of that threat that so many millions of wonderful fathers and mothers have to deal with, which can be fixed, is what my takeaway was from this beautiful film.
Okay. Before we say goodnight to our friends, any closing slides that upcoming events? Let's see. We now created a late deadline submission for our international short film competition, the FOLCS international short film competition, which we also call FOLCS Awards Night, where we give out the FOLCSy. We've extended it to October 1st. I learned from our director the other day that over 22 countries have already submitted films, which is really unbelievable because the deadline was just August. So we'll probably have another 20 countries will participate in this. Let's see what else. We've got a bunch of events coming up. We've got, again, yes, that's the actual page that on folks.org. You can actually sign up for email. You scroll to the bottom and you'll see that page. And of course, you know, as you saw to my bottom right, I guess it was back over here to my left, the donate button. You know, we have been providing free entertainment and intelligent talk, which is FOLCS' specialty since the pandemic. And now's a good time to support cultural institutions, especially during a time when people have been sheltering at home. Gentlemen, Justin, we will welcome you back. There's no doubt you are a first-rate filmmaker, an incredible talent, and we hope to invite you back for some other film of yours. Mark, we've got our eye on you and the appearance that you made here. We oftentimes, the next movie you make, we tweet out and Instagram to the world. Mark, this is Mark's most recent film, and here is when he appeared on our stage. We never lose you, Mark. So you'll always, you know, whatever you do, we'll follow you. And same thing, Justin, we'll show clips of you talking the next time you make films, your next film. For those of you who haven't yet seen the film, it opens nationally on September 17th on Friday night. Do not miss this movie. I hope we gave you a sense of how compelling it is on many levels and original that it is. But this movie will change you. And it's not the sort of thing you can normally say about a movie. So I want to congratulate Justin for this remarkable achievement. And for Mark, Michael, thank you always for performing this role for us, educating us and being our mayor lawyer friend. For Thane Rosenbaum from FOLCS, we'll see you until next time. Thanks again. Good night, guys. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
Good night.